Hello and welcome back to the Self-Wealth Real Estate Podcast with your host, Luke Boyron. Today, I'm interviewing Ken Bekendam. If you don't know Ken, he is well known as an expert in development and land use and increasing the use of properties. He runs a company called LegalSecondSuites.com, where he helps small investors convert their properties to duplexes, add coach houses, triplexes, fourplexes, but he also does a lot of larger projects, developments, rezoning, things like that, and conversions like church conversions, office conversions, other commercial conversions. So he does a lot of big projects for himself and for others. He talks about his church conversion project. He talks about his townhouse build that he's doing right now, his development. And I think what we talk about in this interview is very interesting. I think it's really useful because so much of this is so necessary to know to get to the next level as a real estate investor, particularly in Ontario. So take a listen. I think you'll really enjoy what Ken and his expertise has to say. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Hey, Luke. It's great to connect with you. And I'm super excited to be on the show today and to chat everything about real estate.
Awesome. So Ken Bekendam, tell me a bit about what did you do before real estate? Like, what'd you go for school for, and what'd you do before, and how'd you get into this?
Yeah, so actually coming out of high school, my dream was to be a landscape designer. And so my background growing up as a kid was in the greenhouse industry, garden centers, and that kind of led into, wanting to become a landscape designer. And so I went to Niagara College for landscape design. And then I worked for a landscape contractor that was doing like high-end landscaping work. So we're talking like $500,000, $1 million landscaping jobs at people's houses. And so I was a landscape designer there. And then I moved into landscape sales and then started basically acting as a sales rep, selling these landscapes and stuff like that. And so I spent 15 years there basically kind of working all through high school and even after university and stuff like that. I worked there for a long time. And then, but my side hustle was real estate investing. I was investing in student rental properties, McMaster student rental properties. And it basically got to the point where I was getting the monthly cash flow off of my student rental portfolio. And I had 5 student rentals at the time. It was exceeding my monthly paychecks for my landscaping job. And so it was at the point I decided, hey, what if I were to spend 100% of my time on the real estate stuff? How much better off would I be? And so that was in 2018 is when I made that decision to basically quit the landscape industry and go full-time real estate investing. And then that's when I started the new company, my King Homes Inc. and LegalSecondSuites.com, and basically helping investors create legal apartments and increase density and everything else that happened after that.
Yeah, I remember, back when I was more involved with the assignments we do in our business, that I know you bought a couple from us. A couple wholesale deals that we sold to you at the time.
Yeah,
I can think of 2 of them. One I know you turned into a student rental. It was very creative the way you did it too, and I think it's a very low price, and I think you did amazing work on it from what I recall. I think you ended up with quite a few rooms, and yeah, it was really cool.
So, the houses I bought off you, Luke, were one of my best deals, right? Like real estate, it's all about in the buy, right? Buying right. And you definitely, helped me out, as far as being able to buy right, from the beginning. And yeah, the one property is in Brantford, and we did a vertical split on it. So instead of like traditional, no, upper and lower type of apartment unit, we did up front and back. So like the front unit had the half of the front and the second floor, and then the back unit had basically half of the main floor and then the basement unit. So I made that basically an 8-bedroom student rental property. It's still one of my highest cash flowing properties to this day because I rent by the bed. So not even room rentals, it's by the bed. So we have some single occupancy rooms. We have some double occupancy rooms. So I got 2 beds in one room and I rent per bed. And so it's actually worked out very, very well on that type of property. But yeah, this is going back to, this is going back in 2018, 2019.
Yeah, around that. I think there was another one that you bought from us as well, a bungalow that it was a bit of a hoarder house.
Yeah, that was another on it. So this was in 2019, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And I bought it off you, and it was an order house for sure. It was full of junk. And I actually have videos on my social media walking through with my son, who at the time was 3 years old, and we're both dressed up in hazmat suits and walking through and showing all the before images of this flip. But yeah, basically we converted into a 2-unit, put in a basement apartment, and I still hold it to this day. And I got great tenants in there, and again, rock solid property, rock solid deal, and it's all because I was able to buy it right.
Yeah, well, and you knew what to do with it, and you had the teams, and it's crazy to think that's now 5 years ago that we're talking about. How time flies, how long we've known each other and been working on stuff together. But I also want to say, like, I don't want it to sound like, oh, Ken got started buying great deals off of Luke. You already had a sizable portfolio. You very much, were an expert in the space already 5 years ago back then when you were doing this. This was just, hey, great deals on additional properties. You knew how to execute. You knew what a good deal looked like. Because I remember calling you myself on the bungalow and just saying, hey, I have one that's right up your wheelhouse. You said, what's the price? What's the address? I know that, and you started looking into it right away on what was possible. You were the right buyer for that one right away. So it was great.
At that time, I already had 5 or 6 properties that I owned personally. I started helping out, dozens and dozens of other investors with their conversions and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, the timing was great. We connected at through the Right Club at the time, and different networking groups going on, and it's great. And that was a great time period of doing conversions, and it really got my feet wet into the whole conversions world of converting properties, and on a relatively low risk type of development work. I call it, it is a form of development work. Even converting a house into 2 units, it is a small scale version of land development. And if it wasn't for me being able to kind of get my feet wet on these smaller projects, I would have been able to scale up and get into the larger conversion projects and the infill developments and the new land developments and the townhouse complexes and everything else that we're doing these days. It started
and the commercial conversions, church conversions, and so. Well, let's talk about that, because you started with these, and then you were doing these projects for yourselves, and you started taking on clients, and you started kind of legalsecondsuites.com, which is your business where you do designs and plans, and you also, I guess, do the work. Let's start on the smaller scale stuff. Duplex conversions, triplexes, coach houses, things like that. Can you tell us a bit about what legalsecondsuites.com does? What you do through that business?
Yeah, so basically we're a architectural design consulting, land use planning firm. Okay, and so we help investors, homeowners, whoever has a piece of property, a building, a house. We help them find what is the highest and best use for this particular piece of real estate that we have. Is it just simply putting in a legal basement apartment or adding a secondary dwelling unit on the property somewhere? Maybe it's a coach house, a garage conversion, that type of stuff. Maybe there's an opportunity to do like a split and a sever, and we create a new lot on the property, and maybe look at building a purpose-built triplex or a fourplex or something like that. And so we help navigate and explore with clients. What is the opportunity that is before us with this piece of real estate, and what can we do? And we have some of our larger clients who have, commercial mixed-use buildings, and we're looking at converting, vacant commercial space into residential apartments. And, the last number of years with the changes that the province has made with provincial policy, and then the subsequent changes that the municipalities are making with their zoning bylaws, further increasing density, there's tremendous opportunity out there for adding dwelling units. There's not too many pieces of real estate out there that we cannot, add further density to that piece of property, especially now with all the changes that have been made. So anybody out there listening, take a look through your current portfolio of properties and see if there's any opportunity to add more units right now. Right now with interest rates being high and, it is getting tougher to acquire more real estate. And so sometimes it is easier to go back and just look at what you currently have and try and maximize that, for sure. So yeah, lots of architectural designing, of all shapes and sizes of projects. We're doing very small projects, even little deck designs and small garages, detached garages. And, some of our larger projects, we're designing out, 30 unit, townhouse developments and stuff like that, and street townhouses and purpose-built buildings and stuff like that. So it does range quite a bit with what we're doing these days.
Absolutely. And for all the listeners, we're going to get to the big stuff. But I think there's a lot more people playing in this space with, duplexes and 2, 3, 4 units that I think can find a lot of value in it. So I want to stay on this a little bit first before we get on to some of the much bigger things that you're doing as well. Like you said, there's been a lot of changes. I guess what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you a few of my thoughts on where I think that there are opportunities or, good and bad parts of some of these potential developments on the small scale. And I'd love your thoughts on what I think of it, and also anything you can add or other opportunities you see. So I completely agree with what you were talking about with converting existing space, finding your existing portfolio. One of the difficulties can be needing to put a lot of cash into properties. It can be a little bit harder to kind of finance these, and sometimes, refinancing enough value out of them. But I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And I actually think one of the biggest hindrances right now is construction costs. So there's a lot of opportunities to convert, but it's watching your construction costs. So personally, I like adding small units or dividing existing builds into additional small units. So I'll give an example. A property I used to have, it was a side split, 3-level side split, 3 bedrooms upstairs. And in the 80s, they had added a 350 square foot addition off of the living room with a bathroom. And it was very easy and inexpensive to wall off that addition, turn it into a legal second unit. This is in the city of Ottawa. And this was a few years ago, but we turned it into a 350 square foot bachelor, just the addition. And so I was able to rent the full main house like a house. This addition had a relatively private entrance. So the main house rented well as a full house. And this addition rented well separately. We separated hydro meters, and the addition was small enough that it's electric heat with the heat pump, ductless mini split, had its own bathroom. And the tenant on the main house, they pay their own hydro and their own gas bill because they have a furnace, and I just pay the water bill for the property. And so that was a very inexpensive conversion because this basically unit almost existed. The plumbing was already in there for the bathroom. It was easy to add a small kitchen, able to convert the room. So it was an inexpensive build. And then you have a legal duplex at that point. And because it's a legal duplex, even though it's just a little bachelor, you're now appraising and comparing 2 legal duplexes reasonably well. And so it can help the value. I also recently did a triplex conversion in an existing building. So, where you would have taken a bungalow and turned to 2 units before. Well, if you're doing all that work, it might be worth turning, let's say, either the basement or the main floor into 2 units itself, and then still having the other unit. So if you're sure it's going to stay a converted property, then instead of adding a staircase, let's say you already have a direct staircase to the basement, it's actually very easy to add another entrance to the main floor. You're already above grade, a couple of steps up and a door. And now you can put 2 units into your main floor. So you can probably have 2 1-bedroom units on the main floor and a 3-bedroom basement apartment in the basement. And now I guess a question for me is, do you find that the extra construction costs to do those conversions and possibly development charges are worth it to go from 1-3 rather than 1-2? Do you often see the value on that? That's one question there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is we're asking ourselves every day, is the cost of implementing only one unit worth it? Right? Especially now, right? Like, absolutely. Like, cost of construction is high, and you got to look at, okay, if we're going to go into a building or a house, we got to maximize the density. We got to basically squeeze out as many units, whether big or small, as we can, to maximize our construction budget and house purchases and interest rates and carrying costs and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's very difficult doing the 2 to 3, 4 unit conversions. Those days are gone, basically. And so what we're seeing is, big picture, we're seeing a lot of the smaller mom and pop investors who traditionally did do the bungalow conversions, or maybe they're doing some triplex conversions or even a fourplex. They're kind of getting squeezed out. Because we're starting to see more sophisticated investors come in and doing like the 5 to 10 unit kind of conversions. Just because, they're having a very difficult time financing their projects. They're having a very hard time like recapitalizing afterwards, like trying to get the capital back out. Maybe they're not as resourceful as some of the bigger, more sophisticated investors. So like they don't have the buying power, to get materials at, cheaper prices and stuff like that. And so that segment of the market is getting squeezed. Absolutely. Right. And yeah, like, a lot of times when we're, looking at, is it worth, sometimes we have to go through some higher level planning approvals to get to a triplex or get to a fourplex, or, get to a 5 or 6plex. And I ask clients, is it to get that one additional unit, and you have to go through all of these planning approvals and building permit approvals or minor variances or rezoning, like, can you justify the added carrying costs and time delays and added expenses and studies and plans and everything you have to get for one additional unit? It's very challenging. So especially if you have to go through like a rezoning, and,
100%.
Like, so you have to look at how much time is going to be invested into getting your one unit, and can you justify it, right? And what we're seeing the vast majority of time is no. Like, we need to be getting like 4 or 5 units kind of out of a project in order to kind of justify all of our time and energy and money that we spent.
Well, and a rezoning is, a lot of this is, and I'm sure this comes up a lot for you, but the government makes it so difficult. Every level of government makes it so difficult. I had a property. It was a townhouse, an end unit townhouse, where all of the townhouse lots, the townhouses needed to be 20 feet wide in the area, right? That was the zoning. This lot, it was an end unit. It was 50 feet wide. It had an extra 30 feet at the end. For some reason, the original builder of the development just didn't build on that side. Across the street, they built and filled in that space, but this was just a huge extra exterior side yard. The difficulty to get, so it fit all of the setback requirements, it fit everything else it needed. It needed no minor variances. We requested to sever this by consent with no variances required at all. And it took probably over a year and a half, $30,000 in planning consulting fees. The committee of adjustment was denying it or delaying it for the stupidest reasons. Neighbors were coming and complaining. They're like, well, what about this? And where's the snow going to go? And I saw the previous owner was a motorcycle gang who owned it before us. So the neighbors hated us over that, which had nothing to do with us. And they're like, well, they used to change the oil on their bikes in the backyard, and so it could be contaminated. And for a consent to sever a townhouse lot, they had us do an environmental assessment for one lot to sever off a townhouse, which was, that's an extra $5,000, and you're paying $5,000 for the survey, and it probably cost $50,000 to get a lot that fit as of right. And one of their problems was, because we were severing a lot that was 30 feet wide, it was technically wide enough to build a detached, but not without interior side yard setback on the other lot. So they were concerned about that, but they could have just made it a requirement. Instead, it got pushed back to another meeting. And their problem was that our lot was too wide. Our new lot was too wide. Like, how is this a problem? And so, yeah, just, it's so, it's like, but if we had done the interior side yard setback from the townhouse, then we wouldn't have had enough room for a detached. So we were doing it right at the townhouse lot and then would have built attached to the townhouse. But the level of, it shouldn't have cost $50,000. It should have been a 5-minute application. It should have been allowed as of right. And that's just an extra burden and cost that is going to get passed on to all homeowners and people who are trying to buy housing.
It can get very technical and you can get very into the weeds, right? And, when it comes to planning approvals, building permit, it is very technical. It is very detailed work. Has to be just as so in the bylaws and the planning policies. And, as an example, like my church conversion, it took me 2.5 years from purchase to getting an issued building permit to get those approvals in place. And when I started construction, and I'm nearing the finish, I'm a month away from finishing right now. And I look back at all of that planning and approvals and everything, all the hoops that the city made me jump through. It made a lick of a difference to the actual construction of these units, to the finished product. It made no difference. All of the heritage studies, the parking studies, all of the public meetings, the environmentals, the geotechnical reports, fire hydrant studies, parking studies, you name it. I did it on this church project. It made zero difference to this project. And it's infuriating to me when I look back at it, like how much time and energy and cost were wasted. And then honestly, it didn't make any difference to like,
I agree.
Just start construction, get a building permit, obviously make sure stuff is to code. But all of these other regulations and studies that they make you jump through, it is a lot of times just a complete waste, right?
And there's a fine balance that is hard to know because it's not just one department, one consideration. There's a fine balance in knowing the right size. I completely agree with you. Often you're like, minor variance, is it worth it for one unit? For that townhouse, sure it was. The lot was in excess anyways, and it basically didn't adjust the other townhouse's value very much at all to not have the lot. But most of the time, I agree with you, go a lot more. And then there's a balance point, and it's like, okay, if I go above X number of units, now I go into site plan control. Is that cost worth it? Is going from, let's say, 6 units to 8 units, but now in this particular city, they're going to require, more accessible units, or they're going to require it built out of concrete instead of wood, or it's going to be required to do, an upgrade to the electrical system, and I'm going to need a separate transformer that's going to be this extra cost. And so sometimes when you add that 1 or 2 extra unit, the additional costs on the entire project end up being so much more that it's a wash on the value of the extra units, and you're better off building a little smaller. You may end up doing better. So sometimes it's not worth going from 6 to 8 if you're, thinking of tearing something down and building. But then it might be worth saying, well, instead of 6, can I build 12 or 20? And then at that point, it might be worth it.
Yeah, we have a project where we're helping a client convert an old armories building. This is out in Albany County, like towards Hagersville. And it's an old armories building. And, the potential for redevelopment on the site is tremendous. We could convert the existing armories building. There's plans to, do a big, 3-4 story addition and add another, 20 units to the site. But, we're exploring all opportunities, and what the end result was through the whole kind of exploration of possibilities was to just convert the existing armories building and convert it to only up to 10 units, right? So that we could avoid site plan control and avoid all of the extra hoops and stuff that we'd have to go through once we hit site plan. And there's no need for stormwater management and grading and drainage and all these other studies that go along with site plan application. And so, even there's opportunity to do a heck of a lot more density. just to kind of save on some of these longer planning approvals, we kept it smaller, just for that reason.
And is that a project you're doing for a client?
Yeah, this is a client project. Yeah. And so
tell me a bit. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like this is what we do with clients. We help explore these different opportunities to look at, okay, what is the best case scenario, best use? Do we keep it at 8 to 10, or try and go for that 11th or 12th unit, and whatever the challenges that may come with trying to increase it that much more.
Yeah. So you mentioned before recording that, you do still work on these duplexes and triplexes and coach houses, but you're doing a lot of work on these larger projects. You want to tell me a bit more about what you're doing there on the larger projects?
Yeah, like obviously, because of market conditions, right, we're seeing our clients shifting, right? Along with myself, I'm shifting the types of projects I'm getting into. And so here our investor clients, they're shifting up into these kind of medium-sized infill development or adaptive reuse types of projects, so getting into we're doing an awful lot of between 5 and 10 unit conversions right now. So we have some clients that have, they own, let's say it's an existing 20 unit apartment building. Maybe it's a 3-story walk up, 20 units are in the building. Maybe there's a common laundry, some storage and some locker rooms, and maybe some really large 3-bedroom units in these older buildings. So they're going through looking at these buildings, saying, hey, can we actually increase density here? Get rid of the common laundry, switch to all in-suite laundry. Let's subdivide some of the large 3 beds into a 1-bed and a bachelor. Let's get rid of the locker or storage area and make that into an additional apartment unit. And so we'll try to squeeze out another, could be 4 or 5, another 8 units out of the building. So we got a bunch of those types of projects we're working on as well. And so those types of investors that are into those types of buildings, they're still very active. They're still very active. They still, have good access to capital and financing. And a lot of these projects are being taken through the CMHC MLI Select program, which seems to be the only way that, developers and investors are really making their projects financially viable right now, is basically using CHMC or CMHC. And unfortunately, we're relying on the government basically to help finance construction right now, just because, the private sector, the market just cannot do it on its own right now because of interest rates and stuff like that. And so things are basically, long story short, they are basically being subsidized by the government, right? And, we're definitely seeing it with developers, especially on not being able to sell units and take units to market. And so there's great opportunity in that space, one of my favorite types of buildings to convert are vacant commercial buildings. These really large, maybe they're 10, 15, 20,000 square foot, just older vacant commercial buildings. Could be maybe an old warehouse, or it could be an old commercial type of vacant building. And, there's tremendous, what's nice about those is that there's no existing tenants, right? So you're not having to deal with renovations or having to kind of go through that whole process and have protests out front of your building because of renovations and dealing with Acorn and all these other advocacy groups, right? You're gently creating housing, right? You're not just, doing unit turnovers and, trying to evict low-paying tenants and just, increasing the rent on the building. I get that is a strategy, and, that can be a very profitable strategy to kind of reposition an existing residential building. But you're not truly creating housing, which is what we need to be doing these days as real estate investors, is be actually creating housing units that have never, ever existed before. And so the way we do that is, through land development, building new construction, or converting, vacant commercial empty buildings into, 10, 15, 20 unit buildings, right? And that's where we see great opportunity. We see great incentives from the government. Depending on where these buildings are located, if they're located in like close to the downtown core of a city, there's a lot of, improvement grants and community improvement grants and development charge reductions, rebates that apply to these types of developments, and then you couple that with doing it through like a CHMC. I keep seeing CH, but it's CN. I keep that.
CMHC. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, I deal with it all the time. Anyways, there's just that's how we make these developments work, and especially now with energy efficiency, like everything is getting switched over to heat pumps for the vast majority of new housing units. Are all kind of being done with heat pumps, which really makes it easy to get, 50 to 100 MLI select points, which leads to great financing, exit financing, right? But just because we have, we're getting better government incentives to create purpose-built rental housing doesn't mean that it's necessarily like easy to execute, right? And it's a big stepping stone for somebody to go from doing a basement apartment to even doing a fourplex conversion. Like that's a big jump on a type of conversion project. A lot more things you have to consider. So going from a basement apartment into like a 10 or 20 unit building conversion, like that's a huge step for an investor to take, right? And so this is where we encourage people, okay, if all you've ever done is a basement apartment conversion, like maybe the next stepping stone for you is to try and do a triplex conversion, because there's enough difference there between a duplex and a triplex from the building code perspective and planning approvals and utilities and all this kind of stuff. Like that is enough to challenge somebody on a smaller scale. And then you go from a triplex and maybe you might tackle a sixplex or something, right? And you work your way up into the larger, more complex development projects and adaptive reuse projects. Like you talk to any of the big developers, the guys that are out there building the 100-unit subdivisions, they're building the 200-unit towers. How do you think these guys started? They didn't start from doing nothing to doing a big tower. No, they started by building a new single detached home on a vacant lot. They got their feet wet on small projects. Maybe they were doing duplex and triplex conversions. And then they scale up into the bigger stuff.
And at every different level and every new project, you learn new skills, you learn new steps. And so as you do the small ones, okay, you learn how to build and you learn how to deal with the zoning bylaw amendment on a small scale or a minor variance. And then as you do the next project, maybe that one was different. There was something else that came up. Okay, now you've got a skill set in a few different areas. And then you do a larger project and a new type of requirement comes in, and now you've got experience with that. And as you grow, you experience all these different requirements for the city. You experience all these different problems that you need to solve, and you get better at solving these problems. So now when you do a larger project, you're not dealing with as many new things that you need to do because you already have dealt with them before. There's only a few new things at each step, rather than going into a big project right away and you don't know what you don't know, and all of these things come up at once and you're trying to problem solve 100 different problems on one property. That can become very difficult.
Yeah, and what's nice about scaling up in this way is you're building your power team, right? On a small, space and apartment project, who's on your power team? Okay, you have your designer, maybe a structural engineer, maybe an HVAC designer. That might be the extent of your your technical team, if you will. Mm-hmm. Once you start scaling up into your larger projects, like a triplex or a fourplex, you might need to do a sizable water line upgrade. Now we need to maybe engage a civil engineer to do some site servicing drawings. Once you start getting into like a lot severance, or some, now we need to add a surveyor to our power team. And as you scale up into bigger projects, you keep adding more professional technical consultants to your power team. And if you're going to do a project that requires a rezoning, now you might need to engage like a heritage expert, right? Or a parking consultant, a technical engineer, a land use planner, right? So we just start adding to our power team as we get into these bigger projects. And so, once you're at the point and you want to develop a 200 unit subdivision, right? Because you've already built up your power team through the years of doing smaller projects, it's not that difficult to be able to tackle these really large projects because you've worked your way up there and you develop these relationships with all these professionals and consultants. Look, we're not out there reinventing the wheel. All of these types of projects have been executed before by others, right? Yeah. We see it all the time. We drive down the street and we see the big towers being built. We see the big subdivisions going in. We see all these types of projects going in. And so it's all about just connecting with the right people, connecting with the right professionals, having these people on your team. You don't need to be the expert in all of these different things. But what you do have to be good at is organizing, coordination. So you as the developer, whether you're developing a small basement apartment or you're going to develop a triplex, you're going to develop, a 50 unit townhouse project, you are the developer. You're the quarterback of your team. Nobody cares as much about your project as you do. And it's your job to bring everybody to the table. You basically execute on your vision for your site. That's the job of the developer, and you don't need technical training for that type of role. You just have to be well organized. And as you scale up into bigger projects, there's more paperwork, right? A lot of paperwork, a lot of documents, technical documents, planning documents, approvals, studies. It becomes, financing, trying to qualify for financing. There's a lot of paperwork. Like some of the projects I'm involved in, our folder system in our computer, like we got, like dozens and dozens and dozens of folders. And in those folders, we have, dozens and dozens and dozens of, PDFs and documents and this and that. And so you have to be well organized. If you become a developer, developing new housing, especially housing that has substantial density to it.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell me a bit about one of the projects you're working on currently for yourself? And I don't know if you want to talk, you had mentioned a couple, maybe the church conversion, or you were doing a townhouse development that sounded like there was some interesting stuff going on there.
We talked about the church conversion already, but I can share with the audience kind of my townhouse development. So, like so many of our listeners, I started out doing basement apartments, okay, small little basement apartments. I'm now working on, 50 plus unit townhouse developments, like taking raw land and creating townhouses.
Okay.
The only way I've been able to get to this stage was by, doing hundreds and hundreds of other small projects for many, many other investors, myself included. And I learned the hard way through making a lot of mistakes, but figuring out the process and who to connect to in order to be able to even remotely have the confidence to tackle a 50 unit townhouse development. And so right now we're conditionally site plan approved for 34 stacked townhouses. And the original plan was to basically take this to market and sell, stacked townhouses to the marketplace as new construction units.
And you were saying initially it was 34 new construction units, stacked townhouses, right?
Yeah, 34 stacked town. We were working on this for 2 years leading up to this moment in time. And, this is one of the things in land development is, at any point in your journey, things can derail. Things can go off the rails and market conditions can shift. And you have to be able to figure out how to pivot in a situation like this. And so we were basically 2 weeks away from launching our new stacked townhouse units. We had engaged a real estate brokerage. We're conditionally site plan approved. We had all of our documents in place. So we're ready to sign agreement of purchase and sales for our units. And the market prices just were not there. We had all the feasibility studies and appraisal reports, and all the numbers looked great on paper leading up to this moment in time. And right when we were ready to pull the trigger, the market prices were not there for us to launch. we're up against some other big builders in the city, the big, Empire Homes or Ani Homes, who were basically also launching their townhouse units way less than ours, like below our costs of construction and land acquisition. And, and interest rates are still very high. And the buyer appetite, was just not there in the marketplace, right? So what do we do? Like, one of the options is we just sit on it and we delay the launch maybe till next year. But that comes with the cost, right? Carrying costs and we're a small developer. We're not a big, deep-pocketed developers like some of these big developers are. These big developers, yes, they're sitting on the land and they're waiting to launch until market conditions improve. But for small developers, you have to learn how to pivot. And so what we ended up doing is kind of taking a couple steps back, re-examining our site and seeing, okay, how can we actually get even more density out of this site so that our cost per unit comes way down. And so we actually had to go back to committee of adjustment and seek further variances for parking reductions and further variances for lot area per unit to allow us to add, in our case, adding another 17 units into our development. So basically taking it from 34 to 51 units. And
adding 50% more.
The reason we're doing that is so that we can then take this project and take it through the CMHC apartment construction financing program, and basically keep it as a rental complex, a 51-unit townhouse rental complex, and keep it and not sell it. And there's a lot of incentive. The numbers actually work much better doing it that way. And the reason being is because, we're not paying as much development charges. Development charges are being deferred out over 6 years. We're proposing 11 affordable units in the development, so we get development charge rebates on those. We're not,
and I imagine those will be like smaller basement units, so you'll probably, it's not probably actually much under market rents. So yeah,
and we're not paying HST now because it's purpose-built rental construction. We're not paying TERIOS fees. And so, there's all of a sudden, off of your pro forma, you cut out so many line items that are very, very expensive, right? And now we've added 17 units, so the amount of rental revenue that can come off of a development like that when you pair it out with the CMHC financing that you can get, the exit financing, now we have a pro forma that actually pencils out. And it can be a profitable development now. But we had to pivot at the 11th hour in order to basically, hindsight is 2020. Maybe we could have, figured that out, a year ago and not be in this position. But, when you set out on a path of land development, before you get into your project, you are figuring out, okay, what's your exit going to be? That's part of your feasibility study. And, the plan at the time and the numbers did pencil out that we were going to sell these units. And that's the path that we went down. But, market conditions shifted and we had to shift to rental construction. And we're seeing this across the board in the development industry where, a lot of developers, they cannot sell their developments right now. And they're actually going back and repositioning them as rental complexes. And that seems to be the big way, especially for, smaller and medium-sized developers. That seems to be what they're kind of focusing their energies on these days is purpose-built rental construction, which doesn't bode well. It bodes well for increase in rental stock, but it's only going to also increase prices for new homes for people because there's not going to be as many new homes flowing on the market, right? They're all going to be made.
And as prices increase for new homes, more people are going to be pushed to rentals. So there you go. At least the rentals are built. A question I have is the ownership structure. Are they going to be condominiumized? Like down the road, once you pass timelines with CMHC, would you be able to sell them individually? these apartments you're building?
Part of our development work up to this point, was going to be 34 stacked townhouses in a condominium complex. And so we had all of our condo docs in order. Everything was set up to be condoized. And, we're still going to be doing that for our 51 units. We're still going to make it a condo. It does give us flexibility as owners in the future that if we want to sell 1 or 2 units off, we can, and so it does give us flexibility to have it as a condo, for sure.
Hey, a little bit of a tangent there, question-wise, but I know that condos can set certain rules for tenants that landlords can't necessarily. If you own all the units in a condo complex, can you set like pet rules, limiting pet sizes and things like that as the condo owner? Can you, because you own the condo corp, can you basically use the condo corp to give to help control some bad tenant behavior rather than only using landlord, relying on the landlord tenant board that isn't very effective right now?
Well, yeah, as the majority owner of the units in your condo complex, right? Like, again, when you want to implement a rule, like part of setting up the corporation, the condo corporation is all the rules and the bylaws, and all it gets drafted out and finalized. And then let's say down the road, you want to make a change, right? You're the majority owner of the unit, so you can enact to make a change and you vote on it and it gets approved because you're the majority owner.
You're 100%. 100% of the units voted. It was unanimous. Yeah.
You still have to follow the landlord tenant board requirements, like the RTA, and the Residential Tenancies Act. You still have to follow those, but you can have these other rules that are part of the condo corporation. For sure.
Yeah, and I mean certain things like no smoking rules can be more enforceable for condos, or pet rules. Landlords can't restrict pets. Like can't evict for pets or something like that. But if a tenant moves in pets in violation of a condo corp's rules, the condo corp can push to have the pet removed or the tenant removed, So there's certain rules that the condo corp can help with. So that's an interesting little bit of a tangent, but, a little benefit.
Yeah, like window coverings and people hanging stuff on their balconies and having too much junk and stuff like that outside their units. All of that stuff you can enforce through your condo manager and not necessarily you as the landlord.
Yeah, that's really smart. I was going to say, I think it's a necessary skill for investors to have to be able to pivot, right? And what you did here was pivot, and you took a situation that was not going to turn out well, or possibly not going to turn out well, and you pivoted and made it into something that would work. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And I also want to say, and something you kind of mentioned, or something you were talking about made me think about this, is the other side of it is some people pivot too much. And I don't think it's a bad thing that you were saying, oh, I could have changed this a year earlier. But you also don't want to be the person that once a month you're like contacting your designer, be like, oh, actually now I want to do this different thing, or now I want to ask for a different variance. You end up spending a ton of money changing all these plans and things like that. So you don't want to be bouncing around like a ping pong ball. It makes sense to set your course and go with it. But once you see proof that, hey, this isn't the right course, now I need to pivot, having that ability to do it is also incredibly valuable. So you need to be rigid in what you've decided to do, but still be able to have flexibility when you need to. And I think it's a good balance to have. And I think you're a good example of how that should be done.
Well, and look, not to say that I haven't had sleepless nights over some of these decision points that we've had to make. For me, it is a bigger project for me, for sure. There's, high monthly interest that we're paying on holding the land. And yeah, no risk, no reward. But at the same time, you do have to have a certain level of risk appetite to tackle some of these types of projects, for sure. But you also have to be resourceful, so that, in case you do get into like a cash flow crunch, because sometimes, pivoting causes delays, and delays can lead to, more holding costs. And this is where we see people get themselves into a cash flow crunch. You do have to be able to have a good network behind you, be resourceful, have good relationships with lenders, whether they're private lenders or mortgage brokers or whoever it is, family, friends, that you can go to in case you get yourself into a pinch,
Absolutely.
And what we're out there in the development world is because, costs are high. We're seeing an awful lot of, not only investors, but some of these smaller developers get themselves into a cash flow crunch, and we're seeing a lot of the developers, especially smaller ones, going bankrupt, because for whatever reason, a whole host of different reasons, we're seeing a lot of investors as well in our networks that are also, running out of cash and not able to make their payments anymore. And so you do have to be careful with how you go about these projects, not take on too many projects, and to really be careful with your leverage. Yes, you can get construction financing for projects, but there's still one of the lessons that I've learned is how to manage construction draws. So in a larger project, you get construction financing, but your first construction draw may not happen until halfway through your project, right? And so you have to have a certain amount of cash up front in order to just fund the development, to get things going, paying for all of your planning and approvals, paying for the first, third of construction or something. And this is what a lot of smaller investors fail to realize, is that they think they're going to get 100% construction financing, and they're not preparing themselves for the cash calls, the cash crunch, to keep their projects going, not letting them stall out. And so, this is where you got to work with, or, consult with people who've done it before, to make sure that you're going into these types of projects with eyes wide open.
Yeah. Awesome. Now we're going to switch to a segment of the show where we talk about the best or favorite and your worst or least favorite deals you've ever done. I think we learn the most from other people's successes and failures, and things that have gone wrong and things that have gone right. Do you have a best or favorite deal in mind?
Well, actually, a best or favorite deal in mind. I think just some of my some of my student rentals that I've done. I've always been a big fan of student rentals. I know not every investor likes student rentals because they do come with higher management and stuff like that. However, my student rental portfolio has been my saving grace through this whole period of time of high interest rates and, mortgage prices increasing and stuff like that. And if it wasn't for my student rentals, which, naturally have a much higher rental revenue to them, and they naturally turn over every year to 3 years, I've been able to keep my student rentals at a very high or above average market rent. And that's been my saving grace through this whole period of time, is that I still have cash flow coming off of my student rentals. And
so do you want to pick one in particular, one property in particular that we can go over the numbers on?
To run the actual numbers? Well, so
a proxy. You don't have to remember the exact numbers, but if you can think of a property.
I did. This is in 2020, 2019, 2020. I bought two bungalows in Hamilton, right by McMaster, and they were across the street from each other, and basically purchased them. I don't know if this was. I'm not saying this is my best deal, but it's one of my more solid ones where we had. I bought them at $400 each, and literally, 6 months later, the market just went up like crazy at that point in time, and I didn't do anything with the property, and it's already worth like $600. Just like the market just went like crazy.
Oh wow.
But I put $200,000 into each of them. To convert them into 2 units, and then I rent them out to McMaster students as 2 separate 3-bedroom apartments, uppers and lowers. And I got, I put $600 into them, basically $400 to buy, $200 to renovate, and they're worth one of them. I just actually got around to getting it refinanced now, but even a market kind of pulling back a bit, it still got appraised on 900,000 for it, and I'm paying $1,100 per bedroom, so $3,300 per month per unit. So what's that?
$5,600 a month in rent.
$600 a month in rent, and these students don't stick around too long. They stick around, a year, 2 years at a time. I fully furnish them, so I don't have, because of studio rentals, they do turn over. I furnish them, so I don't have furniture moving in and out, all the time, damaging my walls and everything like that. And so there's a lot, when students move out and new students move in, there's a lot less work that has to be done for a unit turn. We're not having to go and kind of reheat the whole unit, and we just basically give it a good deep cleaning, and we get new students in there, right? So my turnover costs too are a lot less because I furnish them. And so anyways, those are, I just love my studio rentals, and it's been my saving grace during this time, because, on another one of my other one of my projects, which I would say would be my worst project I'm in right now, if it wasn't for, some positiveness on the other portfolio, like this negative project that I'm in right now, which was a luxury home flip that we're doing. And so this is in Hamilton. And we bought it.
So this is your worst or least favorite deal?
Yeah. It's my worst or least favorite deal. It's been a real pain in my butt. But we bought it at the market. So we paid $779,000 for this place. And, it's supposed to be worth, 1.5 or 1.7 million when we try and sell this place. But we had some major challenges there. So the original plan was to renovate and add a second story onto this. It was a 1-story home, and we're gonna, fully renovate it, put a full second story on it, and then turn around and sell it as like a nice single family home, luxury kind of home. And we brought in a professional engineer at the very beginning to kind of assess the existing structure to make sure that we can, in fact, put a second floor addition on this house. And, we met there as a group, me and my partners with the engineer, walked through the house. He's like, yep, everything looks good. We can go ahead. And so, in order to put the second floor addition, we had to apply to committee of adjustment for a minor variance to get that approved, which we spent time doing all of the architectural, all of the structural. We get the minor variance in place. All of that, basically took us like a year to get the actual building permit in place to be able to finally get the building permit. We had to do a partial demolition because we're basically going to tear it down to the foundation and then build all new up. And the day that the demolition crew is on there, they tear down the house, and guess what? The foundation is garbage. Right. Foundation is complete garbage. And so right then and there, the guy in the excavator basically scraped up the whole foundation. The professional engineer that we retained was complete garbage. And we basically had to go back. We spent a year on trying to get the approval. We had to go back to the drawing board and basically redesign a whole new house. And because we're doing all new construction now we had to go and redesign it as if it was a brand new home, according to all the new setbacks, all the new city requirements. And this was on the Beach Boulevard in Hamilton. And so very high water table, right? It's a stone's throw away from Lake Ontario. So we're high water table. And so we had to basically engineer out a whole new foundation on a high water table in very, unstable soil conditions. And so we ended up, designing out a whole foundation system that had like 34 helical piers in it. And so we have like $150,000 foundation underneath this house.
Which you don't even see once it's built. Yeah.
And so after that point, it basically took us another, 8 months to get a new building permit to construct a new house. By the time we had to go through all the extra hoops and stuff like that. And so now we're into this thing for like a solid year and a half, maybe even a bit longer before we can even start building something now. And, all during this time, the market's getting worse, interest rates are rising. We had a private mortgage on the house, right? We had to renew with the private lender, which was fine. They were happy to do so. But, our construction costs went up like crazy because we were expecting just a partial rebuild, ended up being a full rebuild, really expensive foundation. And yeah, we have a lot of time and money invested into this house flip, basically, that we bought at the peak of the market. Yep. And, and the only way for us to not lose our, because we did discuss, try and just sell it, right? Sell it as a vacant piece of land and take our loss at that time, which would have been, a couple $100,000 would have lost. Or push through and we continue on with the project, continue on with the original plan to sell a beautiful single family home. And we decided to continue and push forward, despite the delays and despite the additional costs to get this home built, and be able to sell it on market to basically try and minimize our loss. We're probably still going to take a loss on it, but none of us were prepared to take like a couple $100,000 loss. Like if we take $100,000 loss split by the three partners, it's much more, it's better, right? And so that's what we're doing with this project. We're basically just looking to recoup the money that we have into it. Nobody's expecting a profit off of it. However, it's been a lesson learned for me, especially when you're getting into doing a rebuild on an existing foundation, is to make sure that you actually do your homework and due diligence and bring in the professional. Even though we brought in a structural engineer, but you know what? We didn't dig any test holes around the foundation to actually get a better look at the foundation. Because this was, there was no basement under this house, right? It was on like basically these small pony walls. And anyways, this is a lesson learned that I learned about structural engineering, and the type of diligence you have to do on a foundation if you're looking to add additional stories. And so all of that being said, any new project that I'm going into, whether it's for myself or for a client, and they are wanting to add stories onto an existing home, I'm saying, hey, look, before we even get into design work, before we even pencil anything out, let's get a structural engineer in there. Let's dig test holes around the foundation. Let's determine the foundation thickness, the footing size. Like a big thing with adding stories on a home is making sure you have a good, properly sized footing on the foundation wall. In order to determine, can you even add a story? So that way clients know that, look, you want to add a story, but you know what? Footing's not big enough. We're going to have to do something about it. And there's ways of engineering around that, but it could also involve a full tear down and a full report of the foundation. And so, if I didn't have this experience, I wouldn't have known how to deal with it on future projects, And so, yes, sometimes learning a lesson can be expensive, but if you don't learn that lesson early on, it will cost you 10 times as much later on another project, on a larger project. And so we kind of learned our lesson on a small project, a small single family flip, so that if I get into bigger projects, I'm not going to have that same issue again.
Absolutely. And I mean, the whole point of this segment is to learn from our mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. And there's a saying, it says something like, a smart man learns from his mistakes, and a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So I'm hoping our listeners can learn from our mistakes and be more careful on their own. And I think it's, an important thing about that is, we can say, definitely structural engineer, sure, but it's also understanding what risks you're taking. Because I take risks all the time when I buy. Like, oh, I'm not sure how good this roof is, or it might be leaking. Okay, well, I'm taking the risk of a $10,000 or $20,000 roof, right? I understand that, and I can run that in the numbers. I've got a buffer. But in certain situations, like where you're talking about, it's not just the cost of pouring a new foundation. It's now the cost of your setbacks no longer being the same. Sometimes, depending on the property, you may not even be allowed to rebuild if you can't keep the foundation. So understanding the implications of what changing something might lead to, and then doing enough investigation based on that. So if it's just, well, I'm going to have possibly a $10,000 roof. Okay, I can understand. I'll build that cost into my numbers instead of doing further, potentially inspection if the numbers work. But something that then it's like, oh, it's not just $50,000 to pour a new basement. It's redesigning the whole thing, and this is super expensive, and now I can't build the same size house potentially. Okay, well, that's worth spending the extra money to investigate. So there's an element of risk versus reward in everything we do, and it's balancing that. And so understanding what the risk can be, and it's like, okay, well, there's a low chance of this foundation not being good enough, but because I understand what the risk could be, it's worth spending the extra time to do it. And I think you're on your best property. I think that's also a great lesson for our listeners, because, some people operate under the mindset that they can fund cash flow negative properties, and that's fine. And I don't disagree with that, but I think your example shows the necessity to also have a stable foundation and base of cash flowing positive properties that generate good revenue. So if you have some properties later on that maybe they're more potential for appreciation, maybe they're more, potential to increase the value in the equity on those properties, but you're losing money in the meantime, you need that stable base of something that's making you money to get there. So I think both your best and worst deal have valuable lessons to learn from. We're going to move on to the final segment of our show, where I have some quick questions for you, that if you can just shoot out kind of your first thought on it quickly. And I have, 3 questions for you. You ready, Ken?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do it. All right. What has changed about your approach to real estate investing with your experience?
I think what's changed is, obviously, I'm doing a lot more due diligence on projects than I used to in the past. Not only from a construction perspective, but also on the land use planning, right? The permitted uses, can we in fact do what we want to do on the property, and spending a lot more time consulting with city staff and or other technical professionals before I jump into a new project. And then also the my partners, my different JV partners that I work with, making sure that if they're coming in as their quote unquote money partner, make sure that they've been underwritten by my mortgage broker. Because I've gone into partnerships with somebody who claims they have money, but when the rubber hit the road, they actually don't have money, or they ran out of cash, or they couldn't qualify or finance something, and I'm left holding the bag. And in a lot of cases, I actually had more money or more resources than my JV money partner did. And so those have been some lessons too that I've learned, that, okay, you know what, I need to underwrite my partners if they're going to in fact be my partners. For sure, because I'm tired of, holding the bag for some of my partners who kind of dropped the ball, right? So
absolutely. Okay. If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you'd have for a younger you?
I would say, well, obviously we all say we should get started sooner in this world, but I would say, learn the land development world much sooner than I did. And the reason being that is for your return on your time, right? And I look at a lot of the projects that I'm working on, doing a 2-unit conversion or doing a 4-unit conversion, or even doing a 10-unit conversion, it could take the exact same amount of time, as far as getting approvals and the whole construction process. leasing up of a building. It could take you the exact same amount of months to execute that project. And time is our most valuable thing that we have. And so I would say, don't do a 2-unit conversion, do a 10-unit conversion, because you're going to have the same amount of time invested and energy. And some of these larger projects can be sometimes easier to finance. And so I would say, go for more density.
Yeah, true. Okay. Last question. What is the most overlooked or the most overhyped investing strategy right now, in your opinion?
I think there's opportunity in every type of strategy out there if you become an expert in that strategy, right? And so, people can be very successful in Airbnbs, even though Airbnbs have taken a real hit lately and don't really seem to be a good strategy right now on the surface, right? But if you're truly expert in that space, you'll be able to figure it out and be very profitable and way more profitable than any other investor in that space. And the same thing applies to guys that are doing flipping, right? I work with a lot of solid flippers who know what they're doing. They have very successful flips, whereas another investor who's not as experienced will lose their shirt, on flipping. And then same thing in the development world, right? Some guys are killing it, some guys are bankrupt. And so I don't think there's any strategy that is necessarily worse than others. I would tell people, don't get that shiny object syndrome and do a little bit of everything, because you're not going to be an expert in any one of those strategies. In fact, you're going to be the worst, right? And so take a strategy, get really, really good at it, double down on it. Yes, don't be afraid to pivot if you realize that it's not working, but just double down on something. Really, get really good. People like to pay people for expertise, right? Our society rewards people who are experts in something, right? We pay people to do something for us because we don't want to do it ourselves. And so, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. This doesn't apply just to real estate. This applies to if you're the best, you're the best barn painter. I had a guy stop by my farm this week painting barns. Okay, but he's the freaking best barn painter in this industry, and everybody calls him to paint their. This guy is going to be very successful, right? Because he's an expert at what he does. And so just get really good at something and stick with it.
Nice. Awesome. I think that's great advice. Ken, legalsecondsuites.com is the website if people want to find out about, your business doing that. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that, or where can people follow you? Where can people find out about you?
Yeah, definitely. I'm the only Ken Bekendam on planet Earth. And so you just Google my name, Ken Bekendam. You'll find me on social media, it's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. My website is legalsecondsuites.com. And that's our EDU and SDU kind of website. But you can book a consultation with me through there if you want to talk about your project. But yeah, definitely encourage you guys to follow on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. My social and marketing team here are doing a lot of work on trying to create great content for you guys, trying to put out some good educational videos about all of this stuff. So yeah, thanks guys.
All right. Thank you, Ken. I think our listeners will get a lot of value out of this. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.